Vincent Felitti overheard an 18-year-old saying, "Overweight is overlooked, and that's what I need to be." From that, Vincent Felitti did a huge study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, and he found out that there was a direct correlation between the number of adverse childhood experiences that led to increased use of the emergency room, increased use of prescription medication, and premature death.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. I have such a treat for you today. Dr. Christiane Northrup is with us, and we're going to talk about the emotional component behind disease and illness. Dr. Northrup's a board-certified OBGYN, multiple New York Times bestselling author, and she's been a guest on many shows, including Oprah, Good Morning America, and Dr. Oz. In addition, Dr. Northrup has hosted 8 PBS specials, and she's a graduate of my angelic attendant training. I call her the fairy godmother of women's health and consider her to be a dear friend. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go to talk with Dr. Northrup. Chris, welcome to the show. I'm so delighted to have you rejoin us for the 3rd time, returning champion.
I know. I remember the first one I did. I was up in Deer Isle, and we just went on and on about my history and how I got here and all that. So this is fun.
I know. You're the only guest I've ever had on 3 times. I'm trying to catch up with Oprah. How many times were you on Oprah?
10.
10. Well, we got a ways to go. As you know, I call you the fairy godmother of women's health. And you are, to me, you're the queen. You know, I have learned so much from you that I get weepy when I think about it. Oh. Because I saw you on Oprah 30 plus years ago, and I was in my late 30s, and you were talking about hormones and menopause and connecting emotions with medical stuff. And I thought, oh my God, this woman resonates with me. And that was before I was into woo-woo. I didn't even know about woo-woo yet. And I thought, okay, so I bought your books and I read them. And then when I did go into perimenopause, I knew what to do. And I credit it all to you. And that was long before I ever met you or you became a dear friend. So on behalf of humanity, thank you from all the women of the world and me.
Yeah, it's good because, after the last 4 years, because so much has changed in the culture, I sort of forget. I helped some people back then. That's great. Yeah.
Oh, my God. You're the first one that talked about emotional components being involved with medical stuff. And you're still one of the only people talking about it.
Yeah.
And that's really what I want to focus on today. We'll have you back for number 4 because, I'm trying to catch up with Oprah.
Okay.
So we'll have you back for number 4 and we'll just go through a bunch of medical stuff. But yeah. I thought it would be interesting and fun for us to just go into the emotional component of disease and illness, especially with women. I mean, it's not just for women. It affects men as well. But you've been talking about this for 40 years.
I have.
Whereas nobody else has.
No, because it's too, our culture doesn't know what to do with it because we don't really have a language of empowerment. We have a language of victimhood. And so, you're a victim of your genes, or you're a victim of your parents, or you're a victim of your body. I mean, in medical school, we were taught that the female body was the inferior model to the male body.
I love when you say you're here to teach women what's right about their bodies.
Yes.
Say more about that.
Okay. The female body is the vehicle through which new human life comes to planet Earth. And the processes of conception, gestation, labor, and birth are how God manifests into physical form, into three-dimensional form. So all of those processes are sacred. And there's an ancient Middle Ages mystic named Meister Eckhart. And he's quoted as saying, "For all of eternity, God lies on a birthing bed giving birth. The essence of God is birthing." So whether a woman has a physical pregnancy, or you know how women are, you just got back from a thing where you're all these volunteers. Everywhere there's a woman in touch with her innate create life energies, there is generally things that make life better. A beautiful meal, a clean bathroom, a bed that's made beautifully, a bouquet of flowers. We really can't help ourselves. In general, it is women who do the family celebrations and think of what's needed for this birthday or whatever it is. Now, some men do that, of course, but in general, it is a feminine energy art form, which is nurturing new life. And this is why and I know you have a son who's into sports, but it's why when an athlete is out there on the field, he goes, "Hi, Mom, look at me, Mom." They never say, "Look at me, Dad." They don't. It's, "Hi, Mom." They give the attention to the one who brought them through her body. Yeah.
And in my son Jonathan's case, if somebody from his team, the University of Alabama, gets injured, he's texting me going, "Mom, scan him, fix him. What's going on? Does he have a torn Achilles? Fix it. We need him in the game." So he's even doing that with, calling Mama, "Fix this guy. Can you heal him? Can you?"
I love that. That is the best. That is the best. Which is why everybody should work with Julie and learn how to do this, because we need everyone, all hands on deck. Yeah.
Well, and I think that healing is a multi-prong approach. And it's been my experience. And I first heard this from you 30 years ago on Oprah, that it's spiritual, it's medical, it's physical, it's taking responsibility, it's feeling like you're worthy, you're deserving of good health, even if you're a woman, because all the research has been done on men.
Yeah.
Say more about that. But I know enough to know that a lot of the medications that women are given are doses that were tested on men, and they've never been tested on women.
That's very, very true. And by the way, Prozac was put on the market after one study of 12 people for 3 weeks. I think that we would all be horrified if we really knew what went on. Like, for instance, there's a very famous medical publication, J. Wiley and Sons. They just removed 18 journals because most of the stuff was bought and paid for science, not true science. So, and also Marcia Engel, who was the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal back in the 90s, said, "It doesn't make me feel any better to know that there are almost no scientific studies being published today that you can trust." So you always want to know who's behind it and follow the money. But in general, that which is feminine has taken a back seat to that which is masculine. So in medical school, at the time I went, I was told that the smart people became internists and the dumb people became the OBGYNs. I kid you not. This is what was going on. And I remember thinking, and I said this to one of my professors, okay, the doctor's responsible for the entire next generation, for pregnancy, the most important time of your life. Those are the dumb people? That's what we're funneling through? Now it's completely changed, but at that time, that's what had been going on for a while. And, and that childbirth was something you wanted to rescue a woman from. So I watched the C-section rate soar to 25% during my internship because they brought in fetal monitoring. And to this day, despite Hewlett-Packard, there's not a single study showing that fetal monitoring does anything more than increase the C-section rate.
Well, and increase the stress rate of the birthing mother, because when I was in labor, my husband was going, oh God, here comes a big one, get ready. And I finally said, get away from that thing. You're stressing me out. I don't need to tense up anticipating this horrible contraction. And so I made him move away from the monitor.
Good for you, so that you could actually feel inside what was going on. What I noticed, and we now have this technological society where we forget to tune into what we know inside. So if you go into the room of any laboring woman, you ask her how she's doing. She looks at the monitor instead of, how am I actually doing? Well, no. You got to look at the TV screen to know. Even if the thing is broken, they do the same thing.
Oh, gosh. Well, and I didn't have any drugs with Jonathan because he came so fast. And I remember in my blow my brains out pain, which lasted only about 20 minutes, I said to my OB, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And she said, yeah, I know, but honey, the train has left the station.
Yeah.
This is happening.
Yeah, there's this amazing time there in transition where you think, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing that makes me the craziest with my clients, most of whom are women, most of whom are our age, is they will be seen by sometimes many physicians, and they will be offered an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medicine because they're being told, oh, you're just being hysterical, or you're just under stress or whatever. And then I get them on my radar because they come to me when they've seen multiple doctors and they're not getting any help.
Right.
And they'll be full of mold, or they'll be, they'll have some other big thing going on that nobody's detected. I can see yeast overgrowth. I can see mold. I can see leaking breast implants. I can see things like that, when I get somebody on my radar. And it makes me nuts, especially when a woman's had a total hysterectomy and there are no hormones prescribed.
Yeah.
And when she comes back years later and she's saying, I'm a mess, and they want to give them an antidepressant, it just makes me nuts when that happens. And it's more often than not. Why?
Well, because that's how we've done it for years. So think about the word hysterectomy. It comes from the word hysteria.
Yeah.
So and you remember there was a wonderful movie about Walt Whitman called Beautiful Dreamer. And in the time that Walt Whitman was popular as a poet, they were removing women's ovaries if the woman got uppity around menopause. Yeah.
Wow.
So what happens at menopause is that a woman finds the voice that she often lost when she got her period, and she wants to then fit in with her peers, be likable to the boys, all of that. So it's almost like the lower chakra opens up because she's gotten her period now. And then the tonsils shut down and she doesn't speak. But then perimenopause, who she really is, comes roaring back. And our culture doesn't want that because we're, the woman post-menopause is speaking the truth. I've always said, if you want to know where your power is, it's in the place that you've been taught to be afraid of. Like, oh, whoa, you're menopausal, now you're old and now no one will want you, that kind of thing. But this is where the power is because you speak truth. I remember when my mother turned, 75 or 80, she said, it is so freeing. You can say whatever you want.
Because you don't care.
Yeah. You don't need to fit in anymore. You've generally, you've taken your lumps, whatever you've done, and you don't care. So, could someone around here please tell the truth? And we need that right now in our society in a big way. Yeah.
Yeah. So pivoting a little bit, I want to get into how emotions play into medical conditions. Have you found that to be the case in your long, illustrious career, both when you're practicing and since you've been teaching women around the world for the past several decades?
Without a question. And in, my huge Bible of women's health, women's bodies, women's wisdom. Okay, so that's like this big. But there's an entire chart about what emotions go where. And because all dis-ease is biosymbolic, and it's a wonderful way to live. So for instance, Julie, I just have been dealing with a right knee problem for the last 3 months. Now it's nearly completely healed. If I were a normal person, like just run of the mill, I would see an orthopedic surgeon, probably have an MRI, all the rest of it. But I knew there is no reason for this knee to start hurting. Well, there is a reason, and I'm going to find out what it is. And it's about moving forward in the world in a different way. It's the right side. That's the masculine side. And I'm very good at, good, let's write another book. I can do that with my hands tied behind my back. But I'm in a stage of life where I need to now step back, receive, have more fun. And yeah, I've put castor oil on it. I've done some things with my Pilates teacher for alignment, my massage therapist, and did biofield tuning, and I still had my mother in my right side a lot, which was kind of fun to figure out what you want to do. Now, breasts, let's talk about breasts. They're about giving and receiving. And we now have a culture in which women have been taught to be afraid of their breasts. We now know, and we've got incredible literature, that mammograms do far more harm than good. But women have been trained to think that a mammogram will save their lives. And the science is not there. For every life that's saved, you've screwed up about 300 other lives with unnecessary radiation, surgery, fear, that kind of thing. So you need to think about these breasts as heart pillows. They're heart pillows. And many times women get breast problems when they are longing for love, longing for connection, and they're in relationship with what we call the back walking away. So we need to learn how to receive love, how to receive pleasure. And it begins with accepting ourselves, which was the whole basis for Louise Hay's incredible career and her little blue book, which was The Mental Causes of Physical Illness. I used to keep that little book in my office drawer. And when someone would come in with, let's say, 6 bouts of yeast vaginitis in a year, I knew that's not a monostat deficiency, folks. That's something else. So you want to really start looking at your body biosymbolically. It doesn't mean that you don't use modern medicine, but it does mean if you really want to cure it, you've got to do the biosymbolic. So let me give you an example from my own life. So in perimenopause, I developed a fibroid on my uterus that was like this big. And I got on the stage once in New York City. Sometimes I get a little unleashed there. And I said, I have a fibroid as big as my husband's head. Okay. Now, the truth of the matter is a fibroid is creativity that has not been birthed yet. What is the womb except for the symbol of where you gestate your creations physically? So I then decided finally, because I'd done dietary change, 100 acupuncture treatments, all that. I said, what am I doing? I got so tired of looking pregnant. I finally said, I know a really good surgeon and I adore him. Just go get the thing out, right? So when I went in under anesthesia, I asked the anesthesiologist to say the healing statements. And this is the work of Peggy Huddleston, Prepare for Surgery, Heal Faster. And she did her seminal work at New England Baptist Hospital with people having hip replacement. And what they would do, they'd learn to get very relaxed and then tell the blood to leave the operative area. And the people got out of the hospital much sooner. I mean, she had a controlled trial and all that. what I did was my healing statements. The most important was, and when you awaken, this is the anesthesiologist saying this as you go to sleep, because you're in a hyper suggestible state. When you awaken, the pattern that led to this condition will have left your body. And that's what I asked him to say. And 2 years later, I was a single woman. So I'm not saying that I'm blaming my husband for causing this, not at all, because that's not going to help you either. That's me preparing to take full responsibility for what was it in that relationship where I somehow needed to curtail my creative energy. It's putting your creative energy into a dead end job or relationship. And I kept trying to make the marriage work when it had simply run its course. Yeah.
I had a fibroid too, and it was big. And on the scans, before pre-op, when they were doing them, it had a face. It looked like eyeballs, almost looked like a skeleton face. It had eyeballs, had a nose, kind of had a mouth. And my gynecologist and we looked at each other. I went, holy mackerel, look at this thing.
Who is that?
And the blood supply that was coming in there too. And you know what? It was right before I sold my surgical device company, which led to me doing the Ask Julie Ryan stuff.
There it is. Like if you continued, and here's the thing, everybody. If we could see it clearly intellectually, it wouldn't have to come in through our bodies. And so you don't get out the flail and beat yourself up. If it were easy, then you'd never kind of learn anything here on schoolroom earth.
Right. Well, and point being, it doesn't have to involve a relationship. It can be something else that we're being led to do. And I held myself back on all this woo-woo stuff because I thought, oh my God, people are going to think I am just out of my ever-loving mind. And I got all these companies and it's going to affect my companies. Well, the company was sold. I didn't have to worry about the other ones that I still had. And I could put myself out there and do the Ask Julie Ryan stuff. Not that it was easy. I mean, it was scary. Yeah. But now I don't care. Right. If somebody doesn't like what I'm saying, fine, go watch football or watch Netflix or whatever. I don't care. But when I started this stuff, I cared because I thought it could have a negative effect. And so to your point, and that's the first time I've really heard it described that way. And it makes sense to me now when I look back at the calendar and I see, okay, that's when all that was going on.
Yeah.
So it freed up, selling the company freed up my ability that I didn't have to worry about that and freed up my ability to do really what I was being led to do and resisting. So the creative thing can be a relationship. It can be a career. It can be a move. It can be any one of a number of things, can be a combination of things, I would imagine.
That's right. But also, see, in perimenopause, you are halting ovulation. So you generally have what's called estrogen dominance, and that feeds the fibroid. So that's the physical part of it. And the other is the perimenopausal period, which is 6 to 13 years, unless you have a hysterectomy or radiation or something, is a rebirth. It's literally you go back to adolescence, and now you've found your voice, and you now have some agency in the world. When you were 12, 13, you didn't. You were at the mercy of whatever was going on in your family. But now you have the wherewithal to create the life that you truly desire. And so, and you'll block yourself to the degree that you're not allowing yourself to take a leap of faith. And it was, of course, a leap of faith for both of us, really, for me to come out with this. I mean, I had friends say to me, could you please not talk about acupuncture meridians and chi and chakras? You lose all credibility. It's like, yeah, but this is where it is. This is how someone can understand what's going on. So I can't keep my mouth shut, even though, I could hide a little longer within the profession.
Well, yeah. And the thing that's really been interesting with you in all the years that I've known you and admired you even before you became a friend is you're right. Every time you get crucified on this stuff.
I do.
And every time it's like, I don't even I stopped questioning whether you were right or not years ago. But every time you come out with something, whether it's like, keeping the umbilical cord attached instead of cutting the umbilical cord as soon as the baby comes out, or something along the lines of all the other things that you've suggested to women to use alternative methods to heal themselves, in addition to Western medicine as we know it, and, and all the recent stuff. Every damn time you're right. So, if I had a palm branch, I'd like fan you with it or something. So it's really been remarkable to watch it all unfold with that. It's been my experience that every kind of medical condition, illness, disease, whatever, there's always an emotional component energetically. And at the end of every energetic healing, and I do thousands of them a year, I always do what I call the energy field membrane healing. And that's the container that holds the energy that makes up the body and the spirit. And there's always a breach in that membrane that reminds me of really thin, stretchy saran wrap, or like sausage casing, that really thin membrane that they'll put the ground meat into making sausage. And I envision myself going into that tear or hole, and I'm shown a scene in my mind's eye. I'm given a year. I'm given a scene, a little bit about what happened. I just got off the phone with a client, and I said, the year was 1962. I see you. You look like you're maybe 8th grade, 9th grade. You're in a hallway in school. There are a bunch of lockers on either side. And it seems to me that you're mortified, and it has to do with a group of girls. She's 78. She knew exactly what it was, and it forms an energy block as I perceive it. My analogies are hilarious at times. It's just how they come into my head. And the block reminds me of a little kernel of popcorn. Then other life events, energy piles on top of it, eventually causing enough pressure causes a blowout in the membrane. Bodies leak in power 100% of the time before there's a medical condition that arises. Here's my take on what's going on. I'd love your opinion and your input on this. My take is the body is kind of like the final straw going, okay, I really want you to pay attention to this, because this is something that's been in there for a long time and you haven't dealt with it. You've been busy, you've been raising your families, you've been having your career, you've been doing whatever. And so it's almost as if the body's going, hey, really pay attention to this, because here's the symptom of this disease that's always curable. Sometimes death is the cure, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But everything's healable. And it's the most important part of an energetic healing as I perceive it. I don't have time to do it on my show, but when I have somebody for a private consult, we always do that, because, in my opinion, we can fix body parts all day long. But if you got a leak in your energy, what's the point? It's kind of like, I would think you saw that in your practice with your gal that came back with 6 yeast infections in a year.
Constantly. So here's how it is. Okay. In shamanism, they would say that a part of your soul got stuck in time, which is why one of their things is soul retrieval. And this very interesting dowser, Raymond Grace, he said, I don't know how to explain it, but what I'm seeing is a lot of fragmented souls. And so it's almost like a piece of you gets frozen in time, because for a little kid, or let me give you an example actually from one of my books. Anne Marie Colbin was the founder of the Natural Gourmet Cooking School in Manhattan. And we became friends. And she was a macrobiotic cook and beautiful and all that. In her 50s, 60s, she developed high blood pressure for no reason whatsoever. Just out of the blue, she ate perfectly, all the rest of it. She went to a very astute internist in New York City. And he said to her, I want you to, he was trying to get at why was this happening? Because sometimes you need enough ego strength as an adult to go back and heal that child part of you. She laid down in Central Park. She had the intention. Intention is everything. She had the intention to know what it was. She laid down in Central Park, and a memory came to her of being 2 years old during the Nazi occupation of Holland. And her mother left her in a basement with a bunch of strangers to go out and try to find some food. And Anne-Marie knew that if her mother did not come back, she was dead, because she didn't have anyone there that she belonged to. It was a bunch of strangers. And so she became utterly terrified. Now, she had enough ego strength to go back in time, and I want to actually tell the audience how to do this, to go back in time to grow up that frozen in time part of her that was now coming through as terror, cortisol, epinephrine, and high blood pressure. And after she did that, like it took her like 2 days, blood pressure went back to normal, has never been high again. So what Doris Cohen, Dr. Doris E. Cohen, who's worked with many people on dreams and so on, and is a clinical psychologist, said that what happens to us with a childhood trauma or trauma anytime is you get stuck. The endocrine, immune, and central nervous systems get stuck at that age. You go into your head to survive. All right, I'm just going to bull through it. I'm going through it. I do not have time to sit here and lose it, okay? And any surgeon or any adult will tell you there are just times you just have to move ahead. You don't have the luxury of losing it. And by the way, losing it, if you're a little tiny kid, movement, sound, and tears, that will move something out of your body. But we have all of these things that we could not do. So what you do is Doris teaches how you go to the magic garden and you just take a deep breath in, and then you visualize a stop sign and you say, stop, you're doing it again. Then you pick a number between 1 and 10. You go down these steps and you come out into a magic garden. So there's flowers and water and it's safe and it's beautiful. And then you see yourself as a little kid at that age, between 1 and 10, the number that you picked. It's very often 7, but not always. And then you see if that little kid can come over to you and you hold her on your lap or whatever. Sometimes she won't. Sometimes she's angry with you because you've got a 7-year-old running your central nervous system, endocrine system, and immune system. And they should not be driving your car. They should not be. Then what you do is you say to them, I will be back, but I have to take my leave. Now, you might remember this ridiculous time, your inner child work from the 80s. I'm taking my inner child to work, and people would take a teddy bear. Like, no, you tell the child, I will be back. I will take care of you now. I'm going to be the adult in the room. The adults in your room did not take care of you. I'm taking responsibility for now. So you do this. You go down into that magic garden daily for 40 days. And if you miss a day, you got to start over. And you can heal anything. You will literally grow up that frozen in time place. I did it with my divorced self. When the marriage ended, it was like I felt like a bullet and a knife went into my heart. And Doris said to me, they did, symbolically. So I went back in time and I'd close my eyes, and honest to God, Julie, I knew how to, she said, well, sew up the wound and all that. As I'm there, and it's all right here in your mind's eye, I thought, no, I can't do this. This needs to be packed. So I packed it, and then I was in bed, and, literally every day I would go back and heal myself into the present moment. And then that part was done instead of dragging it through into the next decade. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense to me because, and I wasn't taught this energy field membrane healing thing. It came into me as I was doing this early on when I started doing this full time. But that kernel of unpopped popcorn, what I've been led to do is psychotherapy. They want you to unpeel your onion a layer at a time of your life. And, let's revisit all those traumas and everything. And I'm thinking, okay, well, yeah, there's always room for psychotherapy. But in this instance with energy healing, I want to get the onion out by the root. And what I see is that it gets rid of all that other trauma that's happened ever since then. I want to go to where did that trauma begin? It may be that somebody called you a poopy head when you were 3 and it hurt your feelings. And we look at that as an adult and we think, well, that was no big deal. But it was a big deal to your 3-year-old little self at the time. That's where that energy block began. That's not where the rupture happened. The rupture happened over the years when more and more emotional energy was piled and stored on top of it. And the information that I get when I do those is mind-boggling. My favorite story is a woman who lives on Guernsey, one of the northern isles off of England. And I saw her as a preteen, and there was an explosion behind her. And I'm seeing all this in my mind's eye. It's like I'm watching a movie. And I said, does that make any sense to you? And she said, yeah, I was a victim of an IRA bombing when I was 12. And I had gotten up on a park bench to look at something. And so all the shrapnel went into the side of my body. And she said, I still have metal in my thigh. She said, I spent 3 months in the hospital. And I thought, okay, that qualifies as a traumatic event.
Yeah.
But that's where her energy block began, and she hadn't ever released it.
Yes.
So by illuminating it, we release it, to your point, whether you're doing it laying down in the middle of Central Park or whether I'm helping you do it because I'm seeing it energetically. And that energy field membrane heals. Body's working on full power. Body can heal and maintain health. I've never seen a membrane get ruptured again after it's been healed. I'm not saying it can't. I just, in thousands and thousands of times, I've never seen it rupture before. You've always had a spiritual connection with full body wellness. And did something, what was the catalyst that brought you to that? I would imagine early in your career. How did you get to that there was more to the story than just what you learned in medical school? And please share with everybody the story about what you were taught your first day of medical school about curses.
Yeah. Okay. What happened in my family of origin is that I had a sister die in the hospital at 6 months old, and I had named her. Her name was Bonnie Laurie. My mother had viral pneumonia that entire pregnancy, which I'm not even sure exists, by the way. And they had her on an antibiotic every day, because back then they gave out antibiotics like M&Ms. Ooh, these were the miracle drugs, right? Then my brother was born, and he wouldn't eat either and ended up in the hospital. So when I'm about 8 years old, I have a new baby brother, and my parents signed him out of the hospital against medical advice because they said, well, if he's going to die anyway. A nurse literally came up to my mother and said, if I were you, I'd get him out of here. The doctors don't know what's going on. This would never happen now. Now what would happen is the state would take the child. But anyway, they signed him out of the hospital against medical advice and said, if he's going to die, then he'll die at home amongst the family instead of die in a pool of vomit like the other child. So my parents went to everyone. Now, my aunt and uncle, my dad's brother and sister, were both medical doctors, and they couldn't help. We finally found a Dr. Crump at Women's Medical, who was a pediatric endoscopy, like put down a fiber optic light expert. And she looked down in Philadelphia and said, the esophagus is so eroded because we were feeding him every hour on the hour with an NG tube, nasogastric tube. And I remember holding the tube. I mean, that's, my mother was totally exhausted. And, they're trying everything to figure out why this kid won't eat. The doctors are telling my mother that he's mentally defective and this and that and the other. The doctor says, take out the tube. The esophagus is so eroded, it will rupture if you put the tube down again, and then he'll die of the mediastinum. This whole area will get inflamed. They take out the tube. They wait 2 to 3 days. She said, let's just see what happens. And he healed enough. Then they gave him, this is stupid, orange juice. That's a little acid, but he would drink it, scream, and drink it and scream. And then they came home and he was eating a roll that the stewardess on the plane had given him. And we all cried. And he was a year old and weighed 10 pounds. I remember standing at the ironing board just before, it was right after college, and I didn't know what to do. I had a bunch of scholarships and I thought I was going to be a biology teacher. But then I decided med school was a better degree. And I said to my mother, I'm just going to try to find out why doctors won't talk to you, why they won't tell you the whole truth. And when I went to interview at the University of Buffalo, this is God's internet, it's how it works. The guy interviewing me had been my brother's primary care physician, and he thought that my brother would be either dead or mentally defective. And what I wanted to say is, no, he's fine. No thanks to you. Because when my mother took him in for grand rounds, Exhibit A, they charged her for an office visit. So I didn't grow up with any delusions about doctors as gods. Also, when I was 12, I was babysitting for a family and they had a box on the shelf that said Natives of Eternity. And I opened it. I opened their mail. I never did that stuff. I was obsessed. And it was a book by Flower Newhouse, a Christian mystic who saw angels, nature spirits, divas, the angels of the wind and the fire. And I was so excited. And I went home and told my mother about it. And she set me up with that woman. So we had a whole series of brunches my whole teenage years to talk about spiritual things. So,
Yeah. So that makes sense that you knew that there was more to the story than just what the medical texts were training the doctors to think. Now, please share with everybody, I love this story. Please share with everybody the story about curses that you heard your first day of medical school.
First day of medical school, they're telling us about pointing the bone, voodoo death. They're literally saying voodoo death, that if you believe it, you die. And this is, in like Haitian cultures and all of that. And and I remember them giving the data that there's no way around it. They point the bone and that's it for you. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's not from pointing the bone. It's from the belief system is so ingrained. It's so ingrained that the people who have that happen, okay, generation after generation after generation, or, what are those religions, right, where they put a chicken head on your porch or, needles in a whatever. I mean, on an energetic level, this stuff operates at a subconscious level. And we humans are so vulnerable to this. Like, for instance, we know, and Ellen Langer just wrote an incredible book called The Mindful Body, Thinking Your Way to Chronic Health. And Ellen is the mother of mindfulness and is a professor emeritus at Harvard. And she begins the book by talking about her mother, who actually was cured of breast cancer, but they treated her like such an invalid that she just never got better. Whereas if she had been treated differently, she would have. And she gives study after study. Like, here's one. You go in for a blood test and they tell you your blood sugar is normal. So let's say your blood sugar is 98, but 99, you're pre-diabetic. So here's how the studies go. If they tell you you're pre-diabetic with 1 point on the blood test, the vast majority of those people go on to get diabetes. But when they're told your blood sugar is normal, they don't. It is how the mind works on us. So, so Julie, in our monthly talks, what I say always is, so I just figure none of this applies to me. They tell you, okay, now you're 50, you need a colonoscopy and you need a breast cancer screening and I'm like, doesn't apply to me. When I go to the gym, if I'm traveling and, you put in your age and all that on the machine, I put in 40. I've been putting in 40 for a long time. And because I figure, that's what we need to do, so doesn't apply to me. Age on the driver's license does not apply to me. That's what I don't celebrate milestone birthdays, although I've got to come up with something, because what I've noticed is when the family gets together for a milestone birthday of somebody, it's my brother's 70th or whatever, I want in on the celebration. I don't want in on the number. Right.
Yeah. Well, changing directions for a second, or maybe not. Actually, I love the voodoo story. Thanks for sharing that. And by the way, everybody, she was at Dartmouth Medical School. She's at an Ivy League medical school. They're teaching her their first day about voodoo medicine. I thought that was a riot.
It is weird. I don't know why, but I'll never forget.
Yeah. Research shows adverse childhood experiences can lead to a life of medical issues.
Yes.
And please talk a little bit about that. And then I want to get into some specifics about toxic relationships in particular. So let's do the childhood thing first, and then we'll go into the toxic relationships.
Okay. So at UCSD, University of California in San Diego, in the weight loss clinic, a guy named Vincent Felitti was noticing that it was the people who were losing weight successfully who stopped. And he couldn't figure out why they were having success. And then he overheard an 18-year-old saying, overweight is overlooked, and that's what I need to be. And she had been raped and gained 100 pounds in the ensuing year. From that, Vincent Felitti did a huge study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study with middle-income, middle-aged people in San Diego, not indigent people from the ghetto, just regular folk. And he found out that there was a direct correlation between the number of adverse childhood experiences, a mentally ill parent, watching your mother be battered, a chronically ill sibling, any of those things. And that led to increased use of the emergency room, increased use of prescription medication, and premature death. Now, this is funny because the study was an amazing study, but here's where they had trouble, Julie. And you can still see the adverse childhood experiences pyramid on I think it's on the CDC website. They turned it over to the CDC, which is kind of like at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they take the Ark and they box it up and they put it in the basement of the Smithsonian. So it's like, okay, so no one's going to see this again. But what they do is they've got all the adverse childhood experiences down at the bottom, and then they have arrows going up to, prescription drug use and this and that. And then they go, mechanism unknown, because this is the whole problem. In medicine, they're looking for the biochemical lesion or the genetic lesion, and you're never going to find it. Now, what we can say, I knew Candace Pert, who wrote Molecules of Emotion and discovered endorphins and enkephalins, and those are the chemicals that the brain makes when it thinks. But also, more of them are made in the gut than in the brain. So you know how you got a gut feeling that doesn't feel right, or a little kid will say, I don't want to hug Uncle Pete? Pay attention. Their intuition is really, really good. So here's what we know, and it goes right back to what you said. You got that little kernel of popcorn, and the saran wrap thing has been injured, or someone's soul is stuck in the past. That's what does it. It doesn't mean that if you have a mentally ill child or whatever, that you're destined. It's not that. It's not cause and effect. It is, if no intervention is done, then this is more likely. But all of our power is in the present. And every single one of us, and you know this from your work, has the power to completely reverse this stuff and be healed. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. What are some of the health issues that arise when somebody's in a toxic relationship, whether it be with a spouse or a child or a parent or a friend or a boss, colleague, whomever?
Well, here's what happens there. These are often the empath people who are really, they're the healers, and they're doing everything in their power to make it right by looking at themselves, putting themselves into a pretzel. And very, very often, these are the people who get the environmental illnesses, chronic Lyme, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. They do everything. They do the dietary change. They do celery juice. They do green juice. They do fasting. They do everything. And they never get better until they finally leave that relationship. And I think this has been the biggest lesson for so many healers and so many empaths. And that is 1 in 5 people is an energy vampire. They are narcissistic, borderline, cluster B, histrionic, and they're not going to change. Now, in the movies, we go to the movies because at the end, finally the guy gets it and he begs to be forgiven, or your mother finally understands how awful she was. It doesn't happen in real life. And that's why we go to the movies. Oh, God, the relief. He finally gets it and apologizes. It doesn't happen in real life. So what I say to women, let's say they're in relationship to a narcissistic man. Now you can leave, and you should leave for your health so that you don't die of breast cancer. But are you willing to deal with the fact that he will be remarried in 15 minutes? Are you ready for that? Because that's what I've seen over and over. And then here's the other thing that an empath believes. Okay, when he's with the other woman now, the upgraded woman, he will change. You don't need to worry. He won't. So probably in 5 to 6 years, you can be friends with her and you can commiserate what you're dealing with.
Yeah. I love how you say that. The only time they heal is in the movies. Is that really true, though? I mean, I know it's funny, but is that really true? What do psychotherapists say when there's a borderline personality disorder or a narcissist or something like that? Are they healable?
They are, but they have to have gone through all the therapists in their county, and they have to finally be brought to their knees. And generally, they're not, because these people are so good at manipulating the system. Now, I have to say that the field of psychotherapy is finally waking up to this cluster B designation, because before, like if we were talking in 1995, couples would go to couples therapy, and the therapist is doing everything in his or her power to keep them together. The borderline or the narcissist is crying crocodile tears, getting all the energy in the room. All the women feel sorry for him, and he's grifting the whole gang, and the psychotherapist is sucked in, and then the empath is sitting there weeping because no one is seeing her side. And by the way, this works equally for men. Good men tend to connect with these borderline women who you can't take your eyes off because they're stunning and they're exciting, and they will suck the living daylights out of a good man. So you need to know what you're dealing with. When I went through my divorce, I didn't even know what the term narcissism was. I just thought.
So tell everybody what it means.
Narcissism is someone who is incredibly self-centered. They run for the victim position. They're incredibly good at it, no matter what. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little example from my own life. So we have a new baby, and I'm, sort of working all the time, and I ask my then husband for some help. He bangs the table I don't get shit time to myself, runs up the stairs, curls up in a ball, and, wants my attention while I'm trying to deal with a newborn baby and working 80 hours a week. And then he says to me later, when I get like this, I need more of your love, not less. It's like, whoa. And I bit on that hook over and over and over, to the point when I remember when I finally healed the pattern, and I was with Ron, who you knew, and he was having a knee replacement, and we're up at his place, and we've got the wood stove going, but it's a soapstone stove, and I'm not used to that, and the smoke is going all over the place, and I don't know how to open the windows because they were different from anything. And he's yelling, and the smoke, and the this and the that, and I'm doing everything in my power. And then I was so triggered. I realized, oh my God, I was about ready to just burst into tears. And I went in where he was lying down because he was post-op. And he says, come here. I'm not angry with you. Just come here. I just wanted the smoke out of here. It wasn't about me at all. I'd never had a relationship where the guy took responsibility for their part of the street. I was always trying to make him better, make him feel better. Oh, and here's what we do, Julie. What we do is, the guy says, oh God, my wife divorced me and I can't see the kids. And what the empath does, oh God, I can heal him. Oh, the poor guy, I can heal him. No, you want someone who's taken responsibility for healing themselves. So a normal person, not an empath, would say, what a loser. That is a terrible pickup line. But an empath, oh my God, let me help you heal. Let me heal your heart, you poor little boy.
Well, and your first husband was a surgeon who was a very successful surgeon. So this was not somebody who, needed his handheld, one would imagine. But yeah, kind of crazy. How do we recognize when we're with somebody who's an energy vampire? And energy vampires, my understanding, and I'd love to hear more about this. It's not just a spouse or a partner. It can be a child. It can be any one of those people that I mentioned before. So how do we recognize that that's really what's going on with that person?
Well, one of the first things is you check your own energy. So I was with someone who's actually a very famous woman. I went to her house and we're having lunch. It's tomato soup served by her cook and whatever. Julie, I could not keep my eyes open. I wanted to fall asleep in the soup. Then I wanted to just lie down on the priceless Oriental rug. It was just suddenly, it's like the Wizard of Oz with the poppies. Poppies. You literally begin to feel that, like you're drained. It's like, we call them vampires for a reason. They're literally drinking your life energy. And for those people who can see this psychically, they literally are going into your energy field and pulling your energy toward them. Yeah.
So what are the character traits? They're usually
larger than
professional victims.
They're professional victims, but they're often very charismatic and very good looking, and you can't take your eyes off them. And they will. So I want to give you an example of this. I had one who was a friend of mine. She was a model and she was used to walking in the room and have all the men fall all over themselves. But what I noticed when we weren't all paying attention to her and she wasn't on stage, she became a deflated balloon. She had nothing to say. It was when I started to look at that, when I started to see it, it was like, oh my God, they have to constantly be getting what's called narcissistic supply. That's your money, your attention, your energy, your nurturing. And that's what they live on, narcissistic supply. And they're a bottomless pit. And then you'll notice, here's what happens. they'll give you one little crumb. And we have to really notice this in ourselves. They'll give you one crumb and it feels really good. Like, oh, they must think I'm worthwhile. This is where the celebrity worship comes in. If you've been around enough celebrities, there's usually nobody there. There's just nobody there. It's a big show. So if you know, I've been on the bus with these people and all the rest of it. And I'll never forget being on the bus with one sort of big star. And all these adoring fans had brought her gifts. She took every gift, put it in a giant trash bag, and they put it in the trash receptacle before leaving town. Whoa. Yeah.
Yeah. So Hollywood, I would think, has a lot of these characters, unfortunately. And when they start to, they probably don't age well, would be my guess.
Narcissists never age well. Narcissists do not age well. Whereas the rest of us who are not narcissists, we finally start to get a handle on it.
Yeah, exactly. So if somebody's in a narcissistic or an energy vampire kind of a relationship and they want to get out, I know there's a bunch of gaslighting and, oh, you're so wonderful, the push me, pull you thing. You're wonderful. And then, you're awful in the next sentence. And it doesn't make sense. How do they navigate that? How do they do that? And how do they know that that's really part of the equation that's making them sick?
Well, they generally don't know because no doctor is going to see the pattern, which is why I wrote Dodging Energy Vampires, so that people could see the pattern. But there's some things you can do. You need to start with clamping the umbilical cord between you and them. So there's a few things you can do, like gray rock. Gray rock, they come in the room, you're just a gray rock. You're not giving them any energy. Then the other thing that you can do is do communication written. Like it's got to be written down because they'll change the story every time. Oh, I never said that. I'll tell you what's notorious. When you're sharing custody of children with someone like this and they keep changing the schedule and the children are used as pawns in the situation. It's very, very hard. But there are ways around it. One, you have to build up your own self-esteem so that they no longer have the ability to keep you down. Because if they can keep you down, they keep getting the narcissistic supply.
Yeah. It seems to me, too, that I've noticed that cancer in particular with women, breast cancer, gynecological cancer, is most of the time with women who are good at giving but not good at receiving.
Yeah, that's right. So there's an old adage, people who have trouble receiving tend to attract people who have trouble giving. And so you literally have to practice your receiving muscles. In the old version of The Color Purple, there's a scene, and I think it's with Oprah, and Danny Glover is the bad guy. And she stands up because she's finally realizing, wait a minute, I don't deserve to be treated like this. He has kept all of the letters from her sister. And so year after year after year, she's gone to the mailbox and there's never any letter. He's kept every one of them and put them under the floorboards. And she's then, she moves, this is important, she moves from despair to righteous anger, which will mobilize you out of despair and depression. Righteous anger. You have no right to treat me like this. I used to want to keep that scene on a loop in my office at Women to Women, where she says to Danny Glover's character, you touch me again and your life will rot. There's something about standing up. Tina Turner did the same thing to Ike. She had one dime. And she said, all I want from you is my name. You don't owe me a cent. And then she went on to become Tina Turner.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our job here, because only recently have we begun to understand, and we now have a society that aids and abets this cluster B thing. My feelings are so hurt. Or, I just saw a YouTube video recently where a woman goes to the school board and she says, here's what I'm noticing. You have 30 people in here who are here to make sure your feelings are protected. There are all adults in the room. There are no children here. We need to talk about busing issues, whether they can spell, whether they can read. We don't need to have your feelings taken care of. We've overshot in our society.
Interesting. Well, back to what we were talking about when we first started this conversation, and that is for women in particular to get to the place where we know we deserve to be spoken to in a way that makes sense, whether it be with family members or a spouse or a child or a doctor or somebody else, a colleague at work or a boss. And, that what was the movie? I'm just not going to take it anymore. With Albert Finney, I think, was the guy who yelled out the window. I'm blanking on the movie with that. I could talk to you all day long. A couple more questions as we're winding down here. What's the one thing about women's health that most women don't know, but they need to know?
That you are not designed to disintegrate after the age of 50. You're not designed to be bent over with osteoporosis, to get heart disease, and to have breast cancer, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. It's all a myth. What we call the aging process is largely determined by your attitude, your activity, your diet, all the things that are under your control. I don't think we are even close to understanding what the Bible meant when it said you are made in the image of God. And when Jesus said, these things and more ye shall do also. I want to particularly call out the Christians because, I always think, well, I thought you believed what Jesus said, so why don't you practice it? And, I was in church the other day and this guy had some surgery for melanomas. And I just said, all right, if we're supposed to, pray and expect you to get well, let's do it. And I got a bunch of people around him and laid on the hands. And I follow a guy named Praying Medic. And he said, I had to practice. God told me I had to practice. So I went into Walmart, and I would look for the people with the wrist splints. And then I would just pray for their carpal tunnel. And he said, I got pretty good at it because it actually was my belief, not theirs, that mattered.
Interesting. Well, and on my call-in show, I tell everybody when they're listening to me do a healing, I say, I want you to envision what I'm talking about because it's all of us working together. And it's similar to the power of prayer. When we're all focused on one outcome,
yes,
we have the ability to help that person heal. Nobody heals anybody else. We all help them heal themselves when you were practicing.
Yes.
You didn't, at the end of a procedure, when you sutured up or stapled up an incision, you didn't make the patient's skin grow back. They made their own skin grow back.
That's right.
You were helping them heal themselves. And that's the work that I do too.
Yes.
Last question. Why do we incarnate?
We incarnate because this is a third dimensional place unlike any other in the universe. And what you do here to raise your own frequency changes the entire universe, because this is the planet, the gangster planet of extremely heavy lifting. And I've heard from my friend Daniel Brinkley, who's been dead 4 times, that there's a big waiting list to come here to Earth, because this is the place of incredible spiritual mastery. It is harder here than any other place in the universe.
I've heard that too. And I've also heard that in the spirit world, there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. It's just an experience. And so when we're going through some kind of a horrific situation, perhaps, or something that's really taxing, in heaven, they're going, ooh, wonder what she's going to do with this. how's she going to create out of that? What's going to happen next? And it's like they're watching it with anticipation. We can't understand that from our human perspective. We're thinking, why in the name of God would I want to go through something like this? And it's benefiting us in some way, and it's benefiting all of humanity in some way as well.
I think so. Yeah.
Been my experience too.
Yep.
You are so extraordinary. Brilliant, brave, golden ovary courage, teaching the world, women of the world, and men need to know this too, for their wives and their daughters and their mothers, what we can do and how we really can create a life of joy and a life of purpose and a life of health. And you have my lifelong respect, you know that. And I just adore you and love you. And thank you for coming on the show. How can people learn more about you and your work?
drnorthrup.com. We got everything there. You can follow me on X. I have a Substack, True North, that I enjoy doing. That's sort of my inner circle thing. I'm on Telegram. But drnorthrup.com, I've got an e-news that you can sign up for that tells you what's going on. So,
yeah, sounds good. All right, everybody, that's it for this week. Sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama. Mwah! And from Maine, too, where Chris is. We'll see you next time. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.